Hey, this is Joe Mastriona, better known as Joe M., co-host of Life After Fame podcast, with my best friend, Joe Boglino, better known as Joe B. Yep, we're the two Joes. Thanks for being here today. If you've already subscribed to the show, thank you so much, and a big shout out to our Life After Fame tribe. We love you guys. If you're here for the first time, well, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to the show because today, like in every episode, we're bringing you the most amazing transformational stories of former pro athletes, coaches, musicians, and actors. You know, ordinary people who have achieved the extraordinary. We share with you where they are now, what they're doing, and the challenges of transitioning and beginning a life outside of the arena and/or stage. So buckle up, Life After Fame listeners, because this is going to be an amazing ride. Let's do this.
Welcome to Life After Fame podcast. Just imagine 70,000 fans cheering your name when you've scored the winning touchdown. Imagine standing on stage looking out at the crowd, rocking out to that chart-busting song you created. The applause and recognition you received for your masterful acting performance in that latest blockbuster movie. And then, one day, the cheering stops. This podcast is all about catching up with these stars of yesterday to find out where they're at now and who they are as people, beyond the stardom. This is a true human interest podcast about the people we loved to root for. And now, your hosts, Joe Mastriona and Joe Boglino.
Imagine living in a world where all of your accomplishments, achievements, and accolades end with the word but. You know that one word that basically erases everything you said before it. Like, he's a really hardworking individual, but he's not very imaginative. Or, she gave a great performance, but I don't know who would dress her in that costume. Or, that was an amazing hamburger, but it gave me some serious gas. What do you remember? The super hamburger or the gas it gives? The great performance or the hideous costume? Hardworking individual or not very imaginative? Former 3-year starting Penn State quarterback and NFL second draft choice of the New York Jets, Christian Hackenberg, has lived that exact life. A highly accomplished athlete who achieved great success, is best known for what he didn't do rather than what he accomplished. We talked to Christian about how he handled the scrutiny of the NFL, how it made him stronger, and how he's taken that experience to move forward in all aspects of his life. I believe you're really going to enjoy this. Here we go.
In today's spotlight, we want to welcome Christian Hackenberg, former Penn State quarterback and NFL pro. Christian, welcome to the spotlight.
No, I appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited for this. Looking forward to this.
Christian, I just want to read your resume and really bring some context into what you accomplished, which we feel like was tremendous. And regardless of what other people think, you accomplished a lot. And we want to just go through that and highlight this. So you were a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, a 3-sport athlete in high school, playing also baseball, football, and basketball. So, you were a very good athlete. Obviously, you played all 3 of those, but no, you're a tremendous athlete. You go to Penn State in Happy Valley and had some really amazing things happen there for you too. But before that, you were ranked the top quarterback recruit in 2013 over guys like Jared Goff, JT Barrett, Mitchell Trubisky, all good quarterbacks. And you were also ranked number 13 overall for all players in the nation that year, over guys like Joey Bosa, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Ramsey, just to name a few. So you were in tremendous company and deserving as well. At Penn State, you're the 3rd player ever at quarterback as a freshman for the Nittany Lions, as well as the first sophomore ever to be named captain at Penn State, the first ever. And that's a big deal. We're not talking about junior college. We're talking about Penn State and the Big Ten. So that's amazing stuff. You won Big Ten Freshman of the Year honors in 2013. You were drafted by the Jets in the 2nd round, and you had a 3-year career in the NFL. Now, one of the things that people love to point out is that you were never able to start a game in the NFL, but we maintain, hey, making it to the NFL is I don't know how much higher you can get than that. So we wanted to highlight those resume for you, Christian. And like I said, welcome to Life After Fame.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's the first time anyone's ever done that for me. So
welcome.
I appreciate it.
You deserve it.
It is interesting how we put people in certain compartments, and 99% of us couldn't achieve any of that. So it's astounding. And we want to dig into that as we walk through today. Let's go back a little bit to when we were looking at putting a show together for you. To me, it was more obvious than maybe the words you were saying about the loss of Bill O'Brien going to the Houston Texans after your freshman year. So not only have you committing to a coach, I think this happens all the time, right? These coaches leave, they go find better opportunities, and they leave their recruits there. You stayed. And also, in the midst of all of this, you're standing in the shadow of the Sandusky problem. But you stayed. I think there has to be something added to the resume that said you kept things together and you kept that stability on that team. So, but can you talk to us about the Bill O'Brien, him leaving, and how you dealt with that and how you persevered through it? And what does it really mean to have to lose him as your head coach?
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing. It's something I oftentimes find myself talking about in these situations. But the older you get, the more you reflect on those types of things. And it really goes back to my upbringing and my whole recruiting process in general, and the people that I was around. And I was fortunate enough to be around, like my high school coach and both my parents. Both my parents were Division I athletes. I'm the oldest of four boys. We're sports. And then my high school coach I went to Fork Union Military Academy for high school in Virginia. It was about 15 minutes down the road from my house. My high school coach had been there for 40 years, Mickey Sullivan. Coached Eddie George, Chris Perry in high school, been around tons and tons of pro athletes, college athletes. So I was very fortunate to have a very humble upbringing for all of the hype in recruiting and how it's changed. What Joe just mentioned in the beginning, I never, ever felt that, because I was in my own little small town USA, I guess you could say, and never asked for it and never really cared for it. But then when it comes with expectations, I think that's going to be part of a theme that we talk about. And for me, heading into it, I was very loyal my entire life. My parents raised me to be that way. If you start something, you finish it. So I think that those two themes really stuck and were what carried through for that whole Sandusky everything that went on with Jerry and sanctions and stuff like that. And then Coach O'Brien and him ultimately leaving. So when I decided to go play for him, I had to put together a college list. So I was comparing apples to apples. My parents and my high school coach made me do it. And it was, what do you want to get out of school academically, athletically, and socially? And I asked the same questions everywhere I went. And Penn State, from a football standpoint, ever since I was 2 years old, my dad coached, my grandpa coached for years. I was in locker rooms, touched the football. Those were my first memories. I wanted to play in the NFL. So obviously that was a big part of my process from a football standpoint, was finding a program and a coach and a system that was going to prepare me to play at the next level. Coach O'Brien, coming from New England, just getting done coaching Tom Brady, it doesn't get much better than that, right? And what he sold me on was, we were pretty much running my freshman year, we ran the Patriots system like pretty much verbatim. If I sat there on Sundays were our off days, he'd be like, if Brady or David Andrews were mic'd up, the center, he was like, hey, watch the game. And I'd watch the game and I'd be like sitting there, I'd be like, yeah, it's outside zone right. I knew if he went gold sword, freaking mid zone right. I could, and it was funny. It was like, I'd get a bunch of guys together, drinking beers or whatever. And I'd tell them, yeah, watch this. But it was like a party trick. But yeah, so from that standpoint, it was really cool. And then him leaving, there were some conversations that were had. It was realistically like the trials and tribulations that school and that program and the history that program went through during that period of time was, to say the least, and my small role in it. I'm very proud of that, for keeping a class together, for ultimately when Coach O'Brien went to the NFL, sticking through it, because I always tell people I almost got in a fist fight with my dad over it because he wanted me to leave. He was more of the realist and big picture, like, hey, let's see what else is out there. I know what you're going to be dealing with here possibly down the pipe, and low numbers. My freshman year, we played with 43 scholarship guys. And luckily we had a bunch of older dudes, and then we got our numbers back for my sophomore year. But my sophomore and junior year, we were a super young team, patching things together, depth issues. So it was just, I was fighting an uphill battle from my position as the quarterback, which I say is the most dependent position in sports. But it became more than that for me. It was the school. I'd started something. I got to finish it. So
yeah. Listen, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Right, Christian, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but that's interesting. I'm sitting here listening going, you go in there with a purpose of developing your skills and your position and going to the NFL, but maybe, just maybe, your role, what it turned out to be, was to keep that place together. Maybe that was what it was all about at the time, because I think I saw a number of interviews with you talking about Coach O'Brien leaving, and you couldn't hide it, man. I could see that was really a hurtful thing, right? And
it hurt,
and
man.
so it looked like it hurt.
It hurt, and it was and this is on record, so it's nothing crazy or breaking, but he had looked me and my entire class in the eyes and said, "Listen, if you guys stick this out, like I'll see you guys through." So for us, and that's part of it. Like for me, where I have one of those rough things is like you put it on a bunch of. I was 18, 19. I was 19 as a sophomore. You put it on me to shoulder this now. You know what I mean? And I expected you to be able to ride this through with us. And I've talked to Coach O'Brien. I still do love him to death, respect him, and it's hard because I also understood his side of things, right? He had some things personally in his family that the Houston trip made more sense for him. So there's a lot bigger picture to it, but the selfish side of me and the football side of me was really hurt about it. And just like this thing could have been really cool to see this through with the band that started it. And unfortunately, the general decided to roll. So we had to figure it out with the young guys, but we were. And like I said, very proud of it, but it definitely did hurt.
And I think, Christian, like you said, hey, everybody has to do what's best for them. I find it to be very difficult part for, especially in college sports, because you're not talking about professional athletes and a coach leaves. You're talking about really young men, 18, 19 years old, that you put your faith in that coach. And it's one of the reasons, of course, is a huge reason why you or any other athlete chose that school or whatever school may be.
Right.
And to have a coach leave, especially after your freshman year. And a question I have, it's tough, right? The question I would have there is, do you feel like your freshman year at Penn State was your best year statistically and in terms of just success?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to this entire conversation, right? It's what do you define as success and what do people define as success? Probably the year I'm most proud of is my junior year, because I knew I was going to leave because I couldn't take it anymore. And I just made it. I was miserable my sophomore year, and what I went through mentally my sophomore year, I just made sure I'd never let myself get there again. And if I did, I'd ultimately be like, hey, it's cool. Like I'll step away from it. So my junior year, in terms of being able to approach the game the right way, approach the situation the right way, block out the expectations, because like what you hinted at when we were talking before we got on, there's so many expectations that come on that may or may never be attainable, no matter how talented, no matter how gifted, whoever you are, you'll never ever touch those, right? And like I said, I believe the quarterback position is probably the most dependent position in all of sports. There's so many different variables that go into your success. You see it every day. You see it every year with somebody getting ruined, somebody benefiting from a great system, and then can they sustain it or not? So it's just a very tough position to play, and there's a lot of variables that go into it. So like I said, I think my junior year is probably the most year I was proud of in terms of being able to compartmentalize that and just maturity and growth, right? But without a doubt, my freshman year was another year I was proud of because of my learning curve and me being able to operationalize it, and then getting to a place mentally and physically in terms of playing the game of football. I've never been in a place like that ever in the rest of my career. So it was like weird. I experienced it so fast and so early. And I think Coach O'Brien played such a big part in that. And then that leaving, it was one of those things where I was trying to find it again, and I couldn't. I never could. I never really could. Right. Yeah. And that you got to deal with that. You know what I mean? And again, I made decisions that stepped away from my initial process of why I went to Penn State. Right. And what I ultimately wanted to get out of that experience, that shifted from being developed to go play in the NFL to now sticking through a program that I grew up respecting for what it stood for and the type of people it pumped out, not just players, but people who impacted the world in a certain way as players and things of that nature. It became more about that and protecting that and preserving that. I don't really care what happens in my playing career. I'm going to break records here. I'm going to be like, that's cool. But it became more about the bigger side of things and the alumni base that Penn State stood for, and making a very big, powerful, proud school and alumni network proud again, and be able to get over something that was really unprecedented in the history of college football in terms of sanctions and things of that nature. So
sure. And as you put it very well, success is measured in lots of different ways. We want to just compartmentalize sports as statistics and wins and those types of things. Yep. But what you just stated there, and I want our audience to hear that, is success is measured in lots of different ways. And I feel like you accomplished that at Penn State, especially with the adversity that you had. Your head coach leaving after your first year, and then the Sandusky and all the things that were going on at Penn State at that time. And you staying there, sticking it out, being the leader, because the quarterback is the leader, bottom line. At the end of the day, it just is. And so I think you had a very successful college career. Not only you did statistically as well. Of course you did. But the other part that a lot of people don't see is what you had mentioned. I think that's great. Christian, if you had one or two things that you would change or do differently, if you look back, and hey, we can't, it's always hindsight's 2020, but just, have you ever thought about that? What would you do differently if there is anything?
And it's so hard, right? I think from what the experience gave me as a person, as a man, and what ultimately it's going to give me as a father and what it's given me as a brother. I'm watching now, I got two of my next two youngest brothers both got drafted in their respective sports. And then my youngest brother's going into his sophomore year at Virginia Tech after a really good freshman year. He plays baseball down there. So being able to help them out and seeing that's more gratifying to me than even me doing it, right? Like I get to watch them now not make the mistakes I made in my life and reap the benefits of that, right? And that's part of being an older brother. And that's part of really being able to understand the sacrifice that you may have to make and wanting to give back, right? Yeah. So it's hard. Like I really wouldn't change anything about my experience because it was so valuable from that side of things.
Well, let me spin. Okay, tell me.
I'll get to
give me selfish.
Like selfishly, I keep going back and forth about this. I don't think it's necessarily even like I would have left when Bill left, right? I think that there's a play there. I think there's definitely an alley there where I could have gone somewhere else and plugged and played, but there's a whole bunch of unknowns that went with that. And I think the more realistic one was as mature as I thought I was as a 20-year-old kid who'd been through all the stuff that you just mentioned in my college career, how mature I thought I was as a 20-year-old kid and being ready to make that next jump to the NFL. I wasn't even ready. Like I would have stayed
one more year.
I would have stayed for my senior year. Like things had shaped out. Joe Moorhead had got there. I'd actually met with him for a very extensive period of time during bowl prep. And like I said, I had already had my mind made up for other reasons. But I think the more realistic, like hindsight 2020, what I wish I could have done, I wish I would have stayed another year.
Just stayed a year.
Seen the 4 years out there.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you were drafted?
I had just turned 21.
So the hopes and dreams of Jet Nation is resting on the shoulders of a 21-year-old, right? And I think I read somewhere, whether it was the New York Post, about you were the most scrutinized player that year of anybody on the team. How does a 21-year-old handle that scrutiny as a human being? I mean, that you can't just go tone deaf to everything that's said. You could turn off the radio, turn off the TV, right? I'm sorry, but I get that type of scrutiny. I'm in the fetal position with my thumb in my mouth in a corner in a dark room, okay?
But it's just unfair. It's unfair.
It's unreal, right?
And unrealistic.
It doesn't happen just in New York. It happens everywhere in any sports. If you were a soccer player, striker in Barcelona, I can't imagine, right? But how did you, that's almost like an avalanche, right, Christian? How do you just go, okay, here I go. No one's giving me a playbook on this. What'd you do?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's, and again, like I consider myself, I still do to this day, one of the most mentally tough people that every time I step in a situation, I feel like I can handle pretty much anything. Right. And a lot of it went back to my experience in college and stepping into that. It was really tough because you're dealing with so many different factors, right? You're dealing with management, you're dealing with coordinators, you're dealing with GMs, you're dealing with just a lot of stuff. And that year we kept 4 quarterbacks. So like you have a 21-year-old kid who had the college career he had, probably needed more attention from a development standpoint than I got. And then also, like you're saying, I got, if I kicked the wrong blade of grass walking onto the practice field, someone was sending out a tweet or taking a video of it or reporting on it, right? So it's like you have this huge mess of just a bunch of variables that like I'm supposed to know at 21 years old and really have to like defend myself. And I no experience to it. And I had zero help from anybody within the organization, top to bottom, to do that. So I had to step up there and do that myself. Right. And that's really what the vast majority of my rookie year was, is I'm in a situation where I can't really ever defend myself because no matter what, I do 10 things right. The one thing that I do wrong is what everyone's going to talk about.
Especially in New York.
And especially in New York. And then I have no one else helping me out with this. Right. And I'm limited from a rep and development standpoint. So this is like more football and business side of things. So I just, again, that just plays into like me not being ready. And again, I always look at it as a glass half full. And this is a great experience for me. You know, it was a great experience for me. It's made me a better person, make me a better father. But it gave me a lot of perspective on life and how valuable the right situation is, right? I loved being drafted where I got drafted financially. Those things really helped out. But realistically, I would have much rather been drafted somewhere else in a better situation where I would have been developed properly, right? For the longevity.
I agree 100%. I think, and it's not, there's no way to actually put our fingers on this, but I have said this for years. Coaching is a huge aspect to players' success on any level. I will argue to the day's long. I don't care what anybody says. And I will say this, and Tom Brady is one hell of a player, obviously, arguably the greatest quarterback to ever live.
Yep.
But I also believe that he fell into some luck with some damn good coaching. And Tom Brady's one hell of a worker. I'm not taking anything away from Tom. Don't take that away. But having O'Brien as his coach, as well as having Bill Belichick, again, arguably the greatest coach in NFL, is very helpful. So I'll point, and not to throw Drew under a bus either, but Drew Lock, I've always felt similar about him, where this kid has a lot of potential. You can see the attributes that he has in the NFL. In my opinion, he just hasn't had the coaching. He hasn't had the coaching, and it's unfortunate because it almost seems like that's luck. I think there's part of that, right?
Definitely an element of luck, and there's an element of just the right narrative. Right? Like my narrative coming out of, again, I was 20 years old getting ready for the draft, and my narrative was, we don't know if this kid can play or not. And I just broke like every record. And again, the situation at Penn State was different, right? It was completely different, very different. But when you look at statistics, my narrative versus Josh Allen's narrative coming out, statistically, we were pretty much identical. Physically, we were pretty much identical.
Agreed.
Right? Same person. But the narrative coming out was much different, right? So there's an element of narrative and interpretation and how it's being pumped out that goes into it. And that's where I think the luck plays in, because some guys are going to have a longer leash. Some guys are going to be the overall overarching popular narrative, right? And again, like I said, it is what it is. I can't change that, but it definitely changed my perspective. And I take that to, like I said, my brothers, I'm coaching high school ball now. So like I take that to the high school kids. Sure. And it's really valuable stuff.
Let's peek behind the curtain a little bit. So coaching from a fan's perspective is all about plays and X's and O's and that kind of stuff. However, I think what is very obvious is that coaching has to be around that mental health of their players and you're a young guy. How do they cultivate anybody who's been drafted? I'm not sure a 60-year-old Christian would ever been ready for the type of scrutiny you hit or others have hit. Maybe one more year would have given you more maturity. But still, if you don't have a coach or an environment or community around you, and it almost sounds, is that not a part of the whole program? So when you went into the NFL, it was nothing about how do we help Christian handle New York City or the media and all this stuff, so that, because you know what happens when you get in your head, you might as well just forget about it, right? The minute you get in your head, you're not, And I almost think that I can't even imagine the pressure. So was there anybody there that walked you through that, and other players, or was it just, hey man, that's a feeding
sink or swim?
Yeah, it pretty much was like one of those sink or swim situations.
That's nuts, man.
And I think some places aren't that way, some places aren't. Like from my experience too, having conversations with guys and just gathering information. But my rookie year was pretty much immerse yourself, figure it out, sink or swim. Right.
Yeah, that's just nuts. So you're in business, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit. And it'll be interesting, the correlation in your leadership, and are they giving you different types of, I have to suspect that they are giving you better leadership and rallying around what you're trying to achieve at the current position you're in than you did on the football field. Would you say that is a stark contrast? I don't know. I don't know how it's like for you now, but
so let me just draw that comparison for you as well. That's what's crazy is, like, a lot of people look at the NFL and environment and development, like you said, and there's a lot more sink or swim than you think, right? And that's part of the reason why I wanted to coach high school football, is because you have a real genuine ability to go back to the fundamentals, the basics, teach that, and give the kid a solid foundation to always fall back on, no matter what circumstance, right? A solid foundation. And I think that goes back to the way businesses develop talent, right? Like I had zero, when I landed this gig in the technology space, zero, I literally just came out of, I went back to school, finished school, took like a year, finished because I graduated early. I was on campus for 2.5 years, finished my last year of school, And then I tripped into this job through friend of friend and those types of webs that you spin and people that you meet. And the CEO took a shot on me for having a conversation similar to this. And just the development has been completely different. And it's because I think obviously they're both making financial investments in people, but it's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
I guess they think that you're so replaceable on the other side. Whereas in the business world, you're talking about dealing with budget, not a budget that is big as a professional sports budget, team's budget oftentimes. But you're talking about a budget and how you do it. If I hire this guy and I have to fire him after a year, there's a chunk of stuff there. So people really value the basics and fundamentals. And I draw the comparison for a lot of business developers and business teachers to high school football coaches, because you have to cover the P's and Q's. And if you don't, no matter how talented they aren't going to be successful. And it's funny because you really don't see that as broadly in professional sports. I'm not saying not everyone does it, because I've been a part of some organizations that do it and do a damn good job of it. Right. Sure. And oftentimes those ones are the ones that are winning.
Well, hey, man.
I think that's a direct correlation.
Which is pretty funny.
I would actually say that this is an interesting, not well-known piece of maybe why an organization isn't very successful. The fact that they can't cultivate. To be honest with you, I would think an NFL draft choice would be not very expendable at all. The amount of money, time invested in bringing someone on, but then just to make it a sink or swim type of thing. I think that tells me everything, and maybe why the Jets have had. And here I am. Here's Joe Hack out in Denver, Colorado, talking about. And I think that's why it's interesting to draw the comparison here, Christian. So you're involved in a technology company, and I think you just mentioned that you've gotten more nurturing out of bringing you on board by ownership and more commitment than you did in the NFL. And it seems like you're finding a successful career in this endeavor. And by the way, this endeavor isn't something that you were born to do. You were born to play football, and that's what you spent your time doing. But look at that. It's an interesting comparison, I think.
Well, and then the other thing is all those experiences kind of correlate to this, right? Because there's a little bit of that cowboy and having to go figure it out that I can take from my time spent in New York and some of the other experiences I've had playing sports. Sinking or swimming, right? You get thrown into some water. Are you going to tread it, or are you going to drown? So there's some of that I took into the business world, and my peers and team laugh at it now, and they also say, well, that was ballsy, kid. Like, where'd you learn how to do that? And I was like, I just took a shot on it. It was a gut feeling, right? So there's elements of that experience that I think really pay dividends in the business world. And then there's elements of that experience that, like you just said, I can highlight the fact that they're actually taking time to invest in developing me and putting people around me who are making me better on a day-to-day basis, making me learn new things, taking me outside of my comfort zone, but also not allowing me to fall flat on my face and not really care about it, right? So there's elements on both sides of the equation there that I've really taken away from the sports journey and now my journey into corporate America and the business world. And I think that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, on a bigger picture, that's what life's all about. It's about taking experiences, stacking little wins, and figuring out ways how to make those experiences help you become a better person, no matter how you define that. Right. So the journey into the business world has been fun. And I got my hands in a lot of different pots trying naturally. Like you said, I don't necessarily think I was born to work in the technology business. Love it. It's very stimulating mentally, and I really enjoy it. Doing some media stuff as well, working for the Field of 68. We're the Field of 12. We're subsidiary of that, focused on college football, coaching high school football, like I said. So there's a lot of different parts that I got to stimulate, and a lot of different, a lot of different pots cooking, but not sure which one's going to take right now. But that's the beauty of it, is feeling out which one's going to really fulfill me at this point. So
Christian, playing off of that, I here at Life After Fame, our whole thing is, yes, we want to highlight who you were as a player, but you really realize that doesn't define you. That doesn't define anybody. It's part of who you are, but it doesn't define you. And our whole thing here is getting to know you more as a person on a human level. So I'd like to tie a couple things in. I'm going to read a couple of things here. First being that, one, you got married a couple of years ago to your spouse, Tatum. Congratulations on that. Yeah. But I read this about you, and I just thought it was cool. One, and two, I love this band and I love this song. So I'm gonna read that you slow danced with your mom to a Leonard Skinner song. It's called Simple Man.
Yep.
And I've always loved these lyrics. And when I reread them, it just resonated and connected with me again. So it says, oh, take your time. Don't live too fast. Troubles will come and they will pass. And be a simple kind of man. Oh, be something you love and understand. Tying this back in, I want to read a quote that you had said. I can still be successful. It's not like that's life or death. At the end of the day, say what you want, but I accomplished more than 99% of people in that sport. To the level that I wanted? Absolutely not. But now, move on. It's a game. I'm thankful for football and my journey, but ultimately more excited about the next 40 years as opposed to the first 25. And so those two things for me connected big time. It just resonated with me because in that song, they're talking about having good perspective around life, which you just exercised there in that quote. And so tell us more about Christian Hackenberg and who you are. Love everything that you said there. And I think it's spot on for this show.
No, it's funny, man. Like I said, I've been so defined by sports and my family and my brothers. My releases are hunting, fishing, golf. You take me outside, you let me sit in a tree stand, or I take my dog out to a duck blind and we get just go sit there for a couple hours. Like, nothing better in the world for me. Like, that's my favorite thing. My wife knows it. She respects that. I love spending time with her just as much, right? But there's points of times that kind of plays into the things I like to do. But very easygoing, willing to do other things, willing to try things. But yeah, man, like my mom and my wife helped pick that song out for us. And that's what it is. You talk to people. And like I said, I'm not very easygoing, willing to try things, passionate about certain things. You get me going, I'll freaking talk your ear off. I'll get you going on it. But those are the things that make me click. I really like leading people. I like impacting people. I think that kind of plays into the quarterback mentality that I've been around, crave that type of interaction. And to your point, just like I said, the one thing I said, just stacking little wins every day and making sure I'm finding what those little wins are. Because again, there's so much pressure. There's so many different social constructs in your life that you have to live up to this or that. Like, I'm completely content with sitting on 400 acres and having a farm and teaching myself how to farm. Like, I taught myself how to play the guitar one off season. I just spent time down at my grandpa's place on the eastern shore of Virginia, duck hunted every morning, sat in the middle of the day watching YouTube, plucking away because it's something that I wanted to do, right? So that's stuff I'll take on, but I'd be completely content with 500 acres and learn how to farm it and doing that for the rest of my life. I don't need a bunch of noise, don't need a bunch of flash. That's just what makes me operate, and that's who I am. We're
excited to watch you and what you do here, and there's no shadow of a doubt that you're not going to be successful whenever you're going to be successful whatever you do. And the fact that you're involved in coaching, I think you can bring to those kids and those people you coach the stuff you didn't get. What's really interesting here for me, Christian, is that you recognize all the pearls, at least from what I see, and all the poop you went through. And you're using that to your advantage. I mean, it takes a lot for a person not just to be resentful for an experience that they've had. You've got to find what's valuable in all that stuff, and you can use it you can leverage it to the hilt. So, hey, man, we appreciate getting to know you. We're big fans. It's going to be a blast to watch and see what you do. I have a suspicion it's going to be pretty impactful. And thanks for coming on. And I guess one other question, do you have a lawn on this property that you own?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Do you mow it? Are you the one mowing it?
100%. I'm the one mowing it. Got the Cub Cadet. We're rolling, dude. That's what I do.
Right on.
I'm a big lawnmower too, Christian. Dude,
I
could be a billionaire and I would be out there mowing my lawn because that's where I find peace.
That's right.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Christian, for being on.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. And as we continue to grow and you're growing, we'd love to have you back on, catch up with you. So again, thank you so much for joining us on Life After Fame today.
No doubt. Y'all know where to find me. Appreciate you guys.
We want to thank Christian Hackenberg for jumping on with us this week. Cool guy with a huge future. And he loves to mow his lawn too. Thanks for listening today. As always, we continue to try to give you the best we can and appreciate all your support. Life After Fame, a show about celebrity, incredible stories from extraordinary people, and transition. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit subscribe to get the latest from us. If you have any feedback for how we can improve or have guest suggestions or question ideas, send them to joe@lifeafterfamenow.com. Remember, you can catch us on our website at lifeafterfamenow.com and all social media platforms under the name Life After Fame Now. Join us next week as we will drop another interview from another amazing guest who will tell their story of how they made the transition from the spotlight to their life after fame. On behalf of this episode's guest, Christian Hackenberg, I'm Joe B. with my co-host, Joe M. Thanks. We'll see you next time.